Thanks for joining us today. I know we're a small but mighty crew right now, so thank you very much for joining us for our second section of Anti-Bias in Action. My name is Reynoso, and I'm working today with the lovely Becky. We both work at Hilltop. I am one of the mentor educators and primarily work with the preschool children ages 3 to 5 years old. And I'll let Becky give a little bit about her role.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for showing up tonight after what we know was a long day. We know this is a tricky time of the year. Um, I said earlier to Maddie, Vero and I also feel like we're running on fumes a bit this time of the year, especially when it's sunny out and we yearn to be outside and just chill. So we really appreciate you putting in the effort to come to the live session. My name is Becky Krueger. I'm the faculty life coach and outreach coordinator at Hilltop. I was a teacher for many years, working also primarily with 3 to 5 year olds. And now I get to work mostly with adults. And that comes with its beautiful challenges and rewards, as you can imagine. So, really excited to be here with you for our second session.
Yeah. And we are really hoping that, that you've seen or heard a little bit of the first session, which was a lot more informational. We're hoping that with this second section, we'll be able to have more time to really go in depth of some real scenarios, things that may have been going on in your classrooms, and have some conversations around those moments to help you strategize and feel more confident in this. So I'm going to move on to our agenda for the day. We are going to review a little bit of that information from our first session and review the anti-bias goals and what our role as an educator and caregivers are in part of that. Then we're also going to talk about scenarios, challenges, and strategies so that we can really think about those real life moments that can be very dysregulating to us as adults or scary or nerve-wracking. So we really want to give you that opportunity to dive a little deeper, think a little bit about it, ask questions, whatever it is that you really need to help guide your thinking in this work, because it is important work in our field. We're working with children who are developing their identities and developing their sense around them. And it is a huge responsibility that we need to take on. And then we'll hopefully have some time for some questions and answers if you have any. And I just want to put it out there too, as well, just that, not just Hilltop, but anti-bias work in general. Like, we have some very powerful leaders out there, but it is ever evolving, ever changing, messy work. We are here to help facilitate some learning, facilitate some conversations, share strategies, share stories, but we are by no means experts. So we can try to be as much of an expert as we can be, but we are not claiming that we are full experts on this subject. This is messy, messy work. This is life. It's a part of the process. And we really hope to dive into some good things with you today.
Thanks, Vero. So as we did in our first session, we'll take a moment to discuss some norms for our conversation today. We realize that our folks who are on the call, since we are a small group tonight, may not be able to fully participate as much as you would like, but we are hoping for there to be at least some conversation, some participation. And with that, it feels important to just review those norms. So we went over this quickly at session 1, but again, as a quick review, do your best to stay engaged tonight. Again, we talked about all the reasons why it might have been hard to come to a Zoom call at 7:30 on a Thursday. And just do what you can to continue to tune in. Emmy, I appreciate your message that you're putting a baby to sleep at the moment. So we appreciate you just at least tuning in and listening. So whatever helps you stay keep your attention on the call as much as you can tonight. And you might feel uncomfortable tonight. Vedo and I feel uncomfortable every time we do these kinds of trainings, every time we talk about anti-bias topics, because we were essentially, all of us, regardless of our identity, many of us were socialized to not talk about these things. And that's especially true for those of us who live in privileged identities. So consciously choosing to have conversations about race, gender, ability, disability, class, anything having to do with our identities in the world, it's very normal for us to feel some of that anxiety, that nervousness come up. And that's just a sign that you're being brave and that you're leaning in and doing the work. Speak your truth. I know I mentioned this at the first session. This one is always tricky, right? I know I always get tripped up on fear of offending or saying the wrong thing or revealing my ignorance around a topic. But really, it's only when we speak up about what we're wrestling with or what our thoughts and questions are that we can actually begin to grow and learn and build our toolkit and broaden our perspectives. Non-closure is also a really hard one. It would be beautiful if we could end this workshop with our anti-bias toolkit all bright and shiny and every one of us feeling 100% ready to go and know exactly what to do pertaining to anything around social justice. But that's not actually how it goes. And as we'll talk about in a moment, as Rosetta Lee says, there is no script. There is no formula that we can just copy and paste when it comes to anti-bias education. It really is moment by moment work. It's about responsiveness around who's in your community and what's coming up, as well as that proactive work and being prepared. But it does require risk and vulnerability and courage. And sometimes we walk away from these conversations and this kind of work feeling a little unsettled. And maybe we are more confused than we were going in. But we ask that you just trust that that is all part of the learning process. And lastly, listen for understanding. I say that also with the caveat that, you know, if you hear or see anything in tonight's presentation that doesn't sit right with you, or you might have some strong disagreement around, Vedo and I really encourage you to call us out on that, or speak up, or bring it up, because we are also on our own learning journey. We don't have all the answers. We have our own unconscious biases. So it's really important that we call each other into that kind of dialogue. And as always, we ask that people just try to have those kinds of conversations in a way that is calling folks in, rather than that shaming and blaming. But acknowledging that sometimes there are strong feelings, understandably, that can come up for folks during anti-bias conversations for many reasons. So I'll pause there. Any questions coming up? Or anything that you don't see in this list of norms that you hope we would also include or consider for tonight? And you're welcome to just put it in the chat.
If you said something similar, I apologize, I didn't quite catch it. Something that the head of the Washington Nature Preschool Association likes to do is also to invite people who talk a lot to step back and people who don't to step forward, which is always really lovely. So sorry if you did say that and I missed it, but.
No, that's a really powerful addition, Maddie. Thank you so much. Yeah. And that also can be tricky, right? Sometimes we don't know, is this my time to step up or sit back? And again, it's all part of the messy process. So thanks for that. Well, we're going to go ahead and advance to the next slide, but Emmy and Michelle, please feel free to utilize that chat if anything else comes up for you in terms of agreements, norms, and just questions that may be arising for you as we continue with the presentation.
So let's take a moment to acknowledge and honor the fact that we are living on Indigenous land. Here in Seattle, we live on the past and present land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, on the lands of the Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and Snoqualmie tribes of what is now known today as King County, as well as on the lands that touch the shared waters and tribes and bands within the Puyallup and Tulalip nations. We honor with gratitude the land itself and these tribes. Land acknowledgements have become a pretty big tradition for a really long time. And through feedback and also my own personal beliefs, even, they can feel a little performative. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about how we've, between the mentor team and the admin team at Hilltop, we've really been doing a lot of reflecting and thinking on how to shift that and root it more into action. So some of the things that we've actually shifted to, rather than having a specific person give a land acknowledgement, is that we've been starting our in-services with grounding exercises where we actually do go physically outside to ground ourselves, or hold something natural like a rock and ground ourselves. Tomorrow is actually our monthly in-service, and our plan is to show a video about how the land around Hilltop was used and utilized, and how people worked the land, and how the ship canal destroyed a lot of the land, and the repair that has happened through that, and the shifts in which the way they had to use the land happened. So we really want to acknowledge the land. Of course, it is important that we don't stop doing that, but also rooting it in further action, further research, sharing stories with children, sharing knowledge about our natural world with them and how they can be stewards of the world. Being in a nature-based preschool, that in and of itself is such a strong way of really emphasizing on these Indigenous cultures and how you can support our Indigenous land. So really want you to think a little bit about how you can continue doing this. So these are some reflection questions that I will copy and paste into the chat. Just for your reflection, if you have reflections in the moment right now, you can, but mainly for you to consider as you're thinking about that. And so the questions are, how are you talking with children and families about Indigenous history, as well as the local tribes that continue to steward the lands shared by Fiddlehead Forest School and our surrounding forests and waterways in the Pacific Northwest? How are you honoring and incorporating Indigenous values and wisdom into your programming? How might you initiate or continue to build meaningful relationships with your local tribes? If there are any children, families, or faculty that identify as Indigenous, how are you making space for them to share their identities, values, and cultural practices in your program in an authentic and meaningful way?
Thanks, Vero. So we wanted to dive into some realities and some little nuggets of wisdom that are really important to acknowledge when it comes to anti-bias education. So this is probably coming as no surprise to those of you on this call and those of you watching this recording, that it's a scary time right now, just to put it bluntly. We're in an era of really intense pushback politically and culturally on the work that we are striving to do and that we know and believe is so important. There's an organization known as CAYL, C-A-Y-L, and forgive me, I'm forgetting what their acronym stands for. But they have been hosting some really powerful trainings on how do we continue to stand strong in anti-bias education in this climate of pushback. So a recent webinar that they hosted, their panel spoke about when the very first edition of the anti-bias education book was published by Louise Derman Sparks and Julie Olson Edwards in 1989. It was considered extremely controversial at the time, and it did receive a lot of criticism and pushback from the public and stakeholders in education, including from NAEYC, who actually published the book. And here we are now in 2025, and NAEYC has strongly embraced anti-bias education principles. They just republished a new edition, I want to say in the last couple of years. And they actually have put out equity statements and statements of support about the importance and the responsibility of early educators incorporating anti-bias education into their programs. So it can just be helpful for us to take that historical perspective, and of course that's very recent history, to just be reminded that even if things feel really overwhelming and intimidating and scary right now, we've absolutely been here before, and we've been able to work through those challenges collectively as a community and stand strong in the face of that pushback. So some of the ways that we can remember to do that and feel empowered. Nadia Jaboneta, who is an educational leader, and you may recognize her name, I think has even published books, if I'm correct, about anti-bias education with young children. She reminds us to look for the facts and the research to guide our anti-bias curriculum implementation. In our first session, we shared with you the They're Not Too Young to Talk About Race infographic from the Children's Community School of Philadelphia. That is a fantastic infographic that is based on research about child development and is a really helpful tool to just always have available for your families, your faculty, and other stakeholders in your program. There are also organizations such as the Center for the Developing Child, the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, as well as our local UW iLabs program, which has been doing amazing research on infant and young child brain development and looking specifically at how bias develops in infants and young children. So really looking for those tools and resources to just help back up the work that you're doing, because while we know that it's crucial and it's important and it's true, there are people in our community and in our schools who may hold different beliefs, may have a lot of discomfort around that. And we need to be able to give them that information to show them where we're getting our data from and what's informing our pedagogy. And another really powerful leader in the field, Debbie Lee Keenan, whose name you've probably heard, she says that anti-bias education work takes commitment, strategic planning, persistence, patience, and vision. This is work for the long haul, step by step. It empowers us to build programs where all children, families, and teachers belong and thrive. And if we can keep coming back to that last sentence, this is about thriving and belonging. I know for me, that's an incredibly motivating statement that really regrounds me in my why I believe in this work and why I continue to come back to it and support it in all the ways that I can, even when it feels scary. And Debbie also says that it's okay for us to embrace complexity and conflict. We can go beyond that binary of who's right or wrong and really work to find a third space, especially with families who may disagree with our curriculum choices. And sometimes we have to accept to agree to disagree, as uncomfortable as that can be. To accept that common ground is not always possible, but that we can't let that be a reason to not do anti-bias work in our programs.
Just to share a fun little story regarding the agree to not to disagree. And obviously, anti-bias is a very serious topic, but there was one year where we had a family who disagreed with the fact that we were reading this book. I already lost the title of it again in my head. It was like Teddy's something, but it's a book that explores gender identity and transition. And I had a family literally steal the book from my classroom and write us an email. And the next day, I just bought the book again and placed it back in and said, we're going to continue this conversation because this conversation is coming from the children, not from the adults. And it's our responsibility to give as much information as possible so that they can make sense of their world. Some more realities and words of wisdom. This work begins with ourselves. As we had given you all homework to do that evaluation, really this work does truly stem from ourselves. We need to know how are we connecting with the world? What are our biases? I've gotten the question, what do you mean by anti-bias? Are you trying to erase bias? That's impossible. We're human. We are filled with bias. It is flipping the bias so that we can empower rather than take it away. So we have to be aware and conscious of our own identities and our own biases, our reactions, and do a lot of self-reflection in order for us to do the work with children. And even with knowing that the work begins with ourselves, I often find myself when I am speaking to children about anti-bias topics is one perspective, my perspective. Someone might think because we are a complex society of people with completely different thoughts. I'm sharing my perspective alone. There's another person who might have a completely different answer. I don't know. But the work really does need to begin with ourselves before we can start to explore with others. Another from Rosetta Lee, safety does not equal comfort. And this is a huge one for me, whether it's anti-bias or risky play. There's so many ways in which that really is so true. Safety does not equal comfort. True dialogue is going to happen in an environment where everyone is safe. That's actually when it's the most possible. A child is not going to tell you something unless they feel safe enough to do so. And that's why it's so important not to say, don't ask that question, don't talk about that, because you are shutting the door. You are creating an unsafe environment for these conversations to happen. So that's why we really need to treat these moments with dignity and respect. It's not always going to be comfortable, and you're not always going to have an answer right away. In fact, more than likely, you're not going to have an answer right away. And that's why the most important part is to say, tell me more, just to get more thinking on what this child or this person might be thinking, approaching things with curiosity, and then circle back. Always circle back, because if you don't circle back, you might as well be shutting the door as well. But again, it's not always comfortable, but that is where we grow. We grow in discomfort. If we were truly comfortable all the time, we would learn nothing. Intention is not the same as impact. we can have all the best intentions in the world, but we have to be very cognizant of our impacts. So when we are, you know, brought, if someone brings something up to us, we need to listen with curiosity and understanding and respond bravely rather than feeling, I mean, it's going to probably be a little bit dysregulating, but really try to accept it and also own it and respond accordingly. But try really hard. I know it feels difficult. Try not to feel ashamed. We're all in a learning process. We're all human. We're going to get things wrong, and that's okay. And we're working in a field where we need to be teaching children that it's okay to fail and make mistakes, because you can make things wrong, right again. You can always right a wrong, or you can always go back. There is no linear time. Things can happen in cycles. Shame is not a productive emotion. Find ways to move beyond it and reduce it in others by using empathy, connection, and growth mindset. Can move on to the next slide. So this is just a little overview on what we had talked about in the first session with the 4 anti-bias goals. So the first anti-bias goal revolves around a child's identity. So that piece is that children are going to demonstrate self-awareness, confidence, family pride, positive social identities. And our adult role as to support that is to create the conditions for children to know who they are in the context of their social environment. And this supports children with multiple cultural backgrounds in developing the tools and confidence to operate in more than one culture, which is really important with how evolving our world is these days. Like, I always am talking about, like, I'm a first generation Mexican, so I often talk about like first generation identity crisis is real. So there are things like being multicultural, multiracial that are really complex, but we really need to make room to explore those things, those concepts with each other. The second goal is diversity. Each child will express joy and comfort with human diversity, accurate knowledge for human differences, and deep, caring human connections. So that can be things like articulating those things, like when you have infants in the program, having photos of different cultures and people represented in books. And also articulating those things like, oh, you're noticing that they have brown skin, just to start building up that vocabulary, even at infancy. And so our adult role, again, is to guide that cognition, emotion, and behavioral development to support learning about and understanding differences and similarities in humans. And the third goal is justice. Each child will increasingly recognize unfairness, have language to describe unfairness, and understand that unfairness hurts. We're all working with preschoolers here. We know the phrase, "That's not fair." So that is definitely one of the goals where anti-bias can really easily be woven in and really support anti-bias work. So our role in that is to support kids in identifying things that are untrue and unfair in images, language, and behavior, stereotypes, teasing, discrimination, supporting kids in emotional development, empathy, to understand that bias hurts. Like, I can remember I was doing a self-portrait group, and off top, like just as she's drawing, one of my students was like, why is it that like Disney characters, the boys never have eyelashes? So even just the fact that she noticed that was incredible. And we really dove into that conversation. And it was actually really great because I had a second small group of self-portrait work where I asked child who identified as a boy, where are your eyelashes? And he was like, boys don't have eyelashes. I don't have eyelashes. And then I was like, here's the mirror. He was like, yeah, I don't have eyelashes. So my intentional work was that the next group I did was put them together to have a good discourse, which was really powerful and fun. And then the last goal 4, is activism. Each child will demonstrate empowerment and the skills to act with others or alone against prejudice and or discriminatory actions. Help every child learn and practice a variety of ways to act when bias is present. And this is the one where so many families that I've worked with where I've had like their older children and then I get some of their younger children, that is the piece that families are always ecstatic to share about, like that, thank you for doing this anti-bias work with my family, because my child, as soon as they entered kindergarten, they were the child that was defending when they could see that someone was being treated unfairly or unkindly. They were really standing up for people. So that piece really, really, really does matter. I think next we were going to go into a breakout group, but since it's a small crew of us, I think we can do it in just out here if you're able to participate.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Vero. So, for those of you on the call, if you didn't have a chance to fill out your self-assessment, don't panic. We'll do a little review of it. And also, those of you watching the recording, if you haven't had a chance, now might actually be a good time to pause the recording and go ahead and just fill it out. Just do that step because that can be really helpful in moving forward. But those of you on the call, if you filled it out, great. If you didn't get to, no problem. We're just going to go through it together here.
And I did copy the link of the whole thing into the chat, but it's a very long PDF. It's pages 13 through 20.
Yeah, thanks, Fedo. So those of you on the call, you can even just open it up and follow it along if you don't have the paper copy in front of you. But essentially, the self-assessment is it's broken up into categories. So the first one is about going within and thinking about your own confidence level and your self-awareness around anti-bias topics. The second section is about how you're setting up your physical learning environment and are you representing these different areas in a comprehensive way. And the third section is about your pedagogical approach. So that's everything from the language that you're using to how you're speaking to children and to all of the children in your classroom and in your learning space. And how are you supporting children's social emotional development and also their critical thinking through an anti-bias lens. And then that last section is about partnerships, right? So your partnerships with each other as families and faculty, and also with the greater community around your program. So we'll start with that first section. And I'll just put a call out and you can come off mute or you can put in the chat, those of you on the live call. Any surprises or insights or helpful information that came up for you when filling out section A, the self-awareness section, and or a goal that you identified for yourself in this section. We'll just give folks a minute to do that, and Veto and I will share as well.
I think it tends to be hard for many people to do number five, to intervene on the spot. Um, that's a lot of feedback that I tend to get.
Yes, thank you for that,
Yes.
Maddie. Ding, ding, ding. I'm in that club. That is definitely the goal that I identified for myself in this section as well. Um, yeah, it's so hard in the moment to find
Mhm.
the words, especially when we talk about how there is no script. We have to find it. We have to be courageous and lean in and figure it out in the moment. Um, I keep coming back to the guidance from Rosetta Lee on this area around do you have a relationship with this person? Do you have some kind of connection, some kind of trust built that you can lean on in this moment? Can you come to it with some curiosity and some compassion uh, in hopes that that person will stay open to the feedback? And of course, not every scenario is going to fit that kind of description. Sometimes there are harmful things said that our responsibility is to intervene and just stop the harm. But hopefully, most of the time, it's more about the unconscious things that, especially that the adults around us might say, that can feel really tricky to figure out. How do I call this person and then let them know what the impact was of that?
I similarly also, that was from the first section, that was the goal that I identified with the most. But mine was a little different in the sense of that for me, where it becomes tricky is not necessarily how to respond, but when I feel too closely related to it and I feel myself becoming dysregulated and empathizing with the situation so much that it hurts me, and I feel like my response could be reactive in a way that endangers that safe conversation environment. um and so, like, what I put down as my goal is, more personal reflection and assessment is required when I'm feeling personally dysregulated by a moment, but always to like pause and circle back in those moments, because like we've been talking about, this is really hard work, but it is also human work, and it's going to make us react as well. And so we have to be aware of our own personal reactions and how that informs the response and the reactions as well.
I so appreciate you sharing that, Beto. I that really resonates for me. I will have moments where I'll find myself even getting mad at a kid, especially when it comes to exclusionary language. Um, you can't play with us. I don't like you. That can really make my blood boil. And then I feel this reactivity in me to want to, make that kid do it differently or be nice to that kid. And yeah, that never works. And it's always a good lesson in, oh, this kid is just trying to figure out how to be a human.
Mm-hmm.
And my job is to help them do that in a safe way while also tending to the child who may have been hurt by what that other child said or did. Yeah. So thank you for calling that out.
I think I often find it easier to step in with children. You mentioned it's hard with adults. I think it's also hard for young professionals to just, where I'm in my stage of life, just in the sense that typically the people who I felt like I needed to call out in some way have been people I would consider my elders, which is a very challenging dynamic, because that, has culturally a lot of respect attached to it.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's same. Grew up saying like you never say no to someone who is like above you or an elder. And I've learned to, pardon me for the recording, say fuck you to all that because we're all human and we all need to learn, even when you're an elder.
Mhm.
And if you're in a position of power, you sure as hell need to hear it.
Love your feistiness around that, Beto. Yeah, that makes me think too about the importance of that relationship and that connection. Is that an opportunity to say, "Hey, I really respect you. I really look up to you. You're my elder. I see you as a really strong leader." And when I heard you say that, it really stopped me up short, or it caught me off guard, um, because it that felt hurtful. Or did you know that that's a hurtful phrase? Because sometimes people actually just don't even know what's coming out of their mouth. Um, yeah, so that seeing it as learning moments and caring enough to call people in. I think about someone on our team who's modeled that really beautifully about, when she has to go into a tricky conversation, with a staff member, or really anyone in her life, about kind of bringing up something hard that she observed or heard them say or do. She does it from this place of, I really care, and I care about you, and I really believe in you, and I want you to be able to grow and to learn. And so that's why I'm having the courage to call you in this way. And I keep trying to go back to that. I really love that, rooting yourself in that intention.
And it goes back to even this work, again, it's human work. So it's rooted in relationship. So in order for us to have these conversations, we need to have rapport and relationship for it to go successfully rather than sideways.
Cool. Would anyone else like to share? We're going to transition in just a moment, about any other goal or insight that came up for you in any of the other sections of the assessment.
I'll share one really quick just because it kind of made me giggle a little bit. In the section for the environment, one of them just says different age groups across lifespan from infants to through the elderly. And my role is mentor teacher, so I'm working across a lot of classrooms. And in some classrooms, yes, that is very visible, and in others, it's not. But I put sometimes, thinking about all four of the classrooms that I'm working with. And then in the comments and goal, I put, this is huge, especially how much I hate hearing children call all elders grandma and grandpa. Don't make assumptions that they're grandma and grandpas. They are elders.
Mhm. Yes. Thank you, Beto. Um, I just realized one other little thing that I felt, that I wanted to share, uh, around that goal of being able to call people in, when we hear biased comments. Something that happened today that felt kind of parallel to that, as I was reading a book to some preschool kids, that we got to a page that was very gendered around names. It was this kid who found a stray cat, and she was coming up with all these names for the cat, and she assumed the cat was a girl, so she was coming up with girl names. But then on the next page, she takes the cat to the vet and realizes, well, none of these names will work for a boy cat. So then she was coming up with all these really stereotypical boy names. And I paused there in the story and I said to the kids, is our names just for girls or just for boys? And I was really pleasantly surprised to hear most of these 4-year-olds say no. Like, names are just names. Kids can have any name. And, we just took like a moment to point that out, that, oh, that's kind of a funny thing. Like, there's no such thing as boy names or girl names. They're just names. Um, and then I actually went back at the end of the day and I put a post-it in the book on that page. And that's something we've done at various times around the school, so that the next grown-up who reads that book, if it's not already apparent to them or on their mind, it's at least a moment of pause for them. I wrote, anti-bias learning moment, challenge the gender normative language. So there are, I guess, more passive ways that we can ask people to do the hard thing or uncomfortable things sometimes, as other adults in our community. Like, hey, I noticed this when I had this interaction with children. Whoever you are, person reading this book next, I really want you to take the responsibility to have this conversation with kids.
Becky, what a beautiful segue into the next slide, if you are ready for it.
Can I say,
Yeah.
not to interrupt the segue too much. I had a moment this week. I was reading a Magic School Bus book, and it's about the water cycle, but there is a part where one of the boys is in the girls' bathroom, and it is like he is embarrassed, and is someone going to see him in there? So I did go through later this week and make sure that to add to our list of books a book about bathroom and gender, and just like that specific one, in the hopes of pairing them in some way. Like, okay, if we want to read this, we can look at it at the time and maybe question at the time, but then also be like, also, here's why that book's joke wasn't really a joke, and just kind of like go from there.
Yeah, no, that's really great that you mentioned that, because like we recently at one of our mentor meetings, we were going through a huge pile of books that no one has touched in years, and we were deciding like what should we keep, what clearly has like what is clearly problematic. And then there were some books that were kind of in the middle, and like we were kind of putting post-its everywhere of just like, this is problematic, but it's also a really good like teaching opportunity for you to really go against like norms and like patriarchy and all of these things. So it's like, while some books feel like they have passages that are like, ugh, that's really outdated thinking, like that is our moment and our opportunity to turn that thinking on its head. Like one of my all-time favorite book series growing up was the Chronicles of Narnia. And I decided to read that with like my quiet awake group, and as I was reading it to them, I was just like, what am I reading right now? But as I was reading, we were having those conversations of like, why not, like what, how is this different from now? So there are still some really great learning opportunities in those moments where you're just like, that's not right. But as it goes with everything, this was in our first presentation as well, but we just wanted to give you a refresher, because again, this is something, anti-bias is everywhere. It is in everything that children are doing, because as we know, when children are learning through play, they are putting their theories about the world around them to the test. They are acting out how they think they should be participating in the world, how they should be acting in the world. So there really are ways for you to weave and look at these anti-bias threads anywhere and everywhere you go. So every time that you're planning curriculum, stop and answer these questions. What aspects of diversity can be a part of this topic? How can I use this topic to help children explore and enjoy ideas of similarity and difference? What ideas, misconceptions, and stereotypes might children have about this topic? How can we design activities for this topic to include all children given their differences in culture, family structure, language, ethnicity, gender, abilities, and economic class? How can I use this topic to support and strengthen children's innate sense of justice and their capacity to change unfair situations to fair ones?
Thanks, Vero. So we just wanted to take a few minutes to do a little reflecting on those first two goals of anti-bias education, which, for many of us can quite honestly feel like the easier parts of the package, so to speak. Thinking about embracing, celebrating, honoring the identities and the diversity of the kids and adults in our community. So this is just an opportunity for us to do a little reflecting on what's something we're already doing. What are the practices in our homes or in our learning environments where we are exploring identity development and accurate language and comfort with similarities and differences amongst each other. And folks who are watching the recording, maybe you can just take a moment, pause, and jot this down. And those of you who are here on the live call, feel free to put in the chat or come off mute what this looks like for you in your role. And just to get you thinking, this might include, skin color work and self-portrait artistry. This might be where you focus on family photo displays or having community visitors or families visit your classroom spaces. This might be where you focus on the materials in your environment and how they really provide those windows and mirrors for kids. And this could be even the way you present provocations to kids. Years ago in the fall, often children are thinking about, connecting with, getting excited about pumpkins because they're everywhere in the beginning of the school year. And for a lot of kids, that's very much associated with Halloween or harvest here in the United States. But 1 year in my class, we decided to just do a provocation that presented a familiar item, pumpkins and gourds, in a way that helped broaden the kids' perspective that there are lots of different ways that a familiar material might be used by different people and by different regions around our country and our world. So we had the little gourds and pumpkins out at the table for doing some representational art, but we also had photos set out of pictures of people using pumpkins and gourds as water carrying vessels, turning pumpkins and gourds into musical instruments. We had photos of families posing for pictures with pumpkins and gourds at a pumpkin patch, and also cooking, actually eating pumpkins and gourds because they are a food source for us humans. So this was just kind of a simple way to open kids' minds to those diverse lived experiences and multiple perspectives. And it was really cool for me and my teaching team and also for our classroom families to see that as a way of doing anti-bias education. Sometimes we think it has to be super on the nose, like, oh, we're just going to talk about race or gender or class in this really direct way. But sometimes it can be done in really creative ways, because that's all connected for children's brain development, and that helps them start to think critically about how not everyone lives the way I do. There's lots of different ways of using things that are familiar to me.
Michelle shared in the chat, we've done self-portraits and different books. In the Arboretum, there are many visitors, and our group is always curious about mobility aids. We've discussed four-wheeled walkers, canes, and service animals.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Michelle. What a great example.
Mm-hmm.
I think as well in my role, I tend to try to give families a lot of resources like before they even come in. So at like orientation, I'm actually preparing things so that the next head of school can get these out earlier. But like, sending social stories on diversity and videos and things for families about like, this is why we talk about these things. And so just kind of like getting those out there to the families as well.
That's great, Maddie. That proactive communication about this is what our community believes and cares about, and this is what you can expect to experience when you're in our community and what your child will be learning about. Okay, I think we're going to go to the next slide. Veto, are you ready for that?
Yeah, so sort of as Becky mentioned, 1 and 2 can kind of feel like that easy way to introduce anti-bias, while goals 3 and I would say probably particularly 4 often feel a lot trickier to navigate. And so with those pieces, we're wondering what challenges are coming up for you around this work, or even if you would like to answer the first question too, like, are there things that are already going on for you that you've done work on in these goals, but knowing again that this is sort of where that the work does become a lot more challenging and a lot more putting more of ourselves into it. Like, what challenges do arise for you when this work is happening? Sort of just like with 1 right off the bat too, like kind of when Becky was talking about how sometimes, especially around exclusion, there can be anger that comes up, and I have felt that anger too, but then I've let it slow down, and I also like will pause and think about there's a reason for this exclusion, probably. And there's also a reason that this child feels hurt. There are always 2 sides of the story. So for me, one of those challenges can sometimes be, how do I pause and make space to allow both of those perspectives to be heard, but then also giving tools for both sides, because there might be unfairness on both sides. And for example, a quick example I can share is, I don't want that child to play with me because whenever we play together, they knock down my structure. Valid. That is a long-term social consequence. That is the relationship you've built. I understand that. It hurts that you're being excluded right now, but you have always knocked down their structure. So I understand why they don't want to play with you right now. So what if we come up with some agreements instead? If you knock down the structure, what do you think should happen? And usually the response is like, we stop playing together. I'm like, great, we came to a solution together. So those are some ways in which that can sometimes work out together, where there is a little bit of that challenge, but also trying to ease into it and see both sides of that story. And again, that way you're describing the unfairness and you're understanding that unfairness hurts, but you're also giving tools to recognize and respond long-term unfairness as well. So those pieces are both equally as important.
So those of you watching the recording, we really do want you to take a moment to reflect, write down what are the sticky spots for you across any of the anti-bias goals. And if anyone here on the live call wants to add to the chat, uh, we'd love to hear what's coming up for you. But I think we're going to go ahead and advance to the next slide. So again, this is just piggybacking on the work we were just discussing. I know we're a small group tonight and not everyone's able to participate live. So we'll just give a minute if anyone here in the call is able to participate and is feeling brave to share honestly a current challenge. It can be current or it can be in the recent past, whether you feel that it was resolved or not, whether you feel good about it or you still have some feelings around it. This is just a space for folks to share so that we can learn from each other's stories and potentially brainstorm and help each other problem solve.
And just so that while you're thinking, I'll read the quotes because I love the quotes on this picture. It was, we've been having a lot of strong emotions in some classrooms. So we've been talking a lot about emotions, and we were using these little like cutout pieces from like a Spot of Feelings book series that talks about a lot of different feelings. And one of the children pasted all of these feelings that they were feeling. And the quote is, I feel left out when someone is not letting me play with them. And I don't like it when they call me stinky poo poo head. I feel silly when they call me stinky poo poo head in a game. I feel silly. I like that. I kind of love the contrast of like, I hate it, but I also love it sometimes. And the fact that they're able to articulate and recognize that. And then the other one is when me and my mom don't know the address, we feel uneasy.
Same.
Yeah, I think that brings in a little bit of like, how do you step in when a child is sort of engaging positively, even if they're receiving unfairness? That can definitely be a hard one of like, I'm glad you're okay with this. Here's why you shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I just want to be like, have you ever heard of a toxic friendship?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a really good question, and it is one that honestly, I don't think I've had a single year in my career that I haven't had that come up in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And to me, one of the tools and strategies that and I know it's not always possible because logistics and schedules and all of that get in the way, but as much as I possibly can, I really, really do try to find those moments, whether it's like it happens that we're reading a book together, or they're the first kid dropped off, or we're able to have a quiet moment at the end of the day because everyone else has been picked up. Those one on one conversations of just like, hey, earlier today, I noticed this, and I really didn't like it. Made me feel like that person wasn't being a friend. Like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like this behavior is truly something a friend would do?
Mm.
Um, so really taking those like small moments to acknowledge those pieces and just like get them to really think about like what truly is friendship, and it might make an impact down the run. It's always interesting because one of my challenges is that with young children, I feel like long-term social consequence doesn't sink in quite as quickly. And sometimes I wish it would, because I'm like, no, like you shouldn't even be friends. But so sometimes I actually will take on that role, and I will I will be like, I actually still need space because of yesterday, the way that you really said something to me unkindly, or you called me a name, or whatever it is. So sometimes I will also use myself as a tool to set in some of those longer term social consequences, to know that it's not just an in the moment impact. It has a long term response. It can have that long term response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Vela, your example is making me think of a quick story I can share that's kind of the flip side of that, where a child was refusing to interact with another child that seemed very clearly based on skin color difference. So we were sitting down for lunch, and we had a tradition in this classroom of everyone would hold hands and sing a little song before lunch. And we noticed we had a white child sitting at the bench, and one of the black children sat next to this white child. And when we went to hold hands, the white child looked at the black child's hand and just stared at her hand and would not take her hand. And so when my co-teacher went over and said, go ahead, it's time to take hands, the child was just frozen, staring at the other child's hand. And then one of us actually took that child's hand and put it in the other child's hand, so they were both holding hands, but the white child was visibly uncomfortable. And the black child was also like, what's going on? What's your problem? For context, these were 4-year-olds. And so we reflected on it later as a teaching team, and we thought about, how we had actually never seen that white child really initiate any play with that black child or have much interaction at all. And based on what we had observed, it seemed really clear that this was a discomfort and an exclusionary behavior based on skin color. So, our approach to that, we really took a long-term approach to that. Again, shaming is not an effective strategy with children, even when we see them engaging what we consider to be harmful behavior. That's behavior that is, of course, harmful for that black child who was facing that exclusion from that white child, but that's also harmful for that white child to not be able to work through that. And that's one of the anti-bias goals, is building that comfort with human diversity. So we did a bit of that forced friendship connection. I don't even know if I'd call it so much friendship. They never bonded, those two kids. But throughout the year, we would find opportunities to pair them together in an easygoing way. Because it was also important for us to tend to the black child who experienced the exclusion and notice how she was doing. Did she feel comfortable around this white child? Did she want to be in his presence? So really tuning into what her comfort level was too. And we would put them together, for like small groups to go to the playground or to go get the snack from the kitchen. And slowly we did notice that there was more comfort, more connection between them. And so that improved, but we had to watch that fine line, right? Of like, we can't force these two kids to be friends, but we can set an expectation, especially for this white child, like, hey, this is your work. So that's just, I think, a scenario that gets played out, unfortunately, many times in many diverse classroom spaces in many places. Yeah. But anybody else want to share before we?
Michelle wrote in the chat, we've currently been navigating exclusion/preferred play partners. There are a certain number of stumps, and they can count how many spots are left to exclude. We're trying, stick to one spot and approach each event separately. Long term, only a few weeks left, but if needed, chosen spots.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely one that is always tricky because like even as educators, like we are natural to, you know, we find ourselves bonding more with certain people than other people, even as adults, even as children and adults and all of that. But then how can we make it a place where no, you don't have to be friends with everybody, but we do still have to treat one another with respect. And respect means not intentionally excluding. So those pieces are really, really important to talk about. And yeah, I mean, I think that that is a really good approach to start with, to stick to that one spot, because that's the one that's always, I know every circle time I'm just like, nope, you already chose that spot, you can't, we're not switching around. But yeah, it's tricky because we do want to support their friendships, but also that respect and the fact that they're going to enter an even more diverse world once they leave our care and spaces. And so we really need to provide them with the tools to meet new people, to have and share perspectives with people that they might not share everything in common with. Um, I'm sorry, but how boring would it be if all of your friends were exactly the same and had every single same thought as you? And also, you wouldn't know how to navigate the world if everyone had the same thought as you. You need to learn how to have discourse, how to see another perspective. So yeah, continuing that work of trying to get them to pair up. I'm not sure how you like if you walk around in the arboretum, but maybe like even doing like wonky pairings with people who never interact with each other, or doing small group work very intentionally so that those preferred playmates are not together. Or even if you have kids that might have like a poor relationship or fight a lot, one thing that has always helped is something that I've heard to refer to as like spicy work, where it is like doing an activity together, but when you're doing the activity together, you cannot move forward in any part of the process until every single person is in agreement. So that way you are getting that dialogue, that feedback, that perspective taking, and then moving through the process together. So those are some tools and tips that could also potentially help with those pieces. And there's more from Emmy, but if you wanted to also share something, Becky.
I think that's great, Beto. And I just wanted to say thank you to Emmy who posted in the chat about the strategy of focusing on community. So powerful with young children that it goes beyond this one-on-one interaction. Like I might not be interested or super excited to play with this kid, but this is what it means to all live together and
Yeah.
to be respectful and care about each other. Yes.
And I also like the comment of I don't allow them to choose their stump, because honestly, there are going to be times where there isn't a choice, and I'm sure that most of your kiddos at Fiddleheads are kindergarten bound at some point. Yeah. So like that is a thing that's going to happen. Also, they're going to have assigned seating at some point. So I think having opportunities where there are no choices are just as valid, where they can choose anything they want.
Mhm. Yeah.
This is going back a few points. The refusal or the concern about holding hands with the child. An activity I used to do at the beginning of the year was like a painting our hands and then stamping it on a thing, and like we are helping hands and this was our thing. But I would pair them up like within the first week, like they didn't really know each other, pair them up and have them do painting each other's hands. Which is a little bit of like building a little physical comfort without being like too much in people's space. Which stuff like that I kind of liked.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great, Maddie. And it also makes me think too, about, if I could go back and do anything differently with those two kids. I don't remember us explicitly reading a book about like the science of skin color, how you get your skin color. And I think that would have been a really helpful step in that long-term responsive approach to, maybe this white child actually doesn't understand why some kids' skin colors are different than his. And might that have helped the connection? Yeah.
And even like bouncing off of that idea, um, like I have a coworker who does self-portrait work very proactively just because she enjoys it. But I've actually used portrait work more as a responsive tool to situations rather than a proactive one. And like skin tone paint mixing, like literally you are seeing that the shades in that child's skin tone are actually also in yours. Like you are not a white sheet of paper.
Mhm.
You are not a black piece of construction paper. There is literally all of these colors that you are mixing that make you uniquely you.
Mhm.
And like even like seeing the kids being like, wait, I want to put some of your skin tone color in mine. Like it's really interesting for them to have like that visual, but they're also engaging in the conversation of like, hey, I use that color in my skin tone too. So it's getting to see that yes, we are different, but it's really illustrating how we are also similar at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. We've got a little homework, always homework. Uh, what do you do next in your journey in anti-bias education? So we encourage you to go back to any goal that you may have set in your anti-bias self-assessment and or a challenging scenario that may be currently playing out for you as a caretaker or parent or an educator. Um, and just work on these first steps. Identify what is one resource I can utilize. Is there a book I could be reading? Is there a movie I want to watch? Is there a podcast I want to listen to? Is there a course I want to enroll in? Um, when we close tonight, we're going to put in the chat and we'll also email this to all of you. We have a little recommended list of folks and organizations that we highly recommend you add to your library and your support system. Um, and also, in addition to identifying a resource that could help you, who's someone who can be your accountability buddy and your ally and can help cheerlead and challenge you to keep moving forward in this work? Maybe that's somebody in your Fiddleheads community. Maybe it's someone outside of that community, but somebody who can really help walk that path with you and help you keep moving forward. And then that
And can I
last,
can I add something to
yeah,
that, Becky?
go ahead,
Just
Beto.
because I think it's really important. Like, for example, I have had a white friend who was like, "Can you help me call that out?" And I flat out told her, "That is not my job, but for you, I'm willing to." So it's like, make sure you're also asking for permission because you also don't want to put the onus on another person to do your work.
100%. Thank you so much for adding that, Beto. Very important reminder. And then that last part of the homework is when are you going to take these next steps? So put it in your calendar, write the actual time. I'm going to seek out this resource or connect with my accountability buddy, Tuesday after Memorial Day or whatever it might be. And we're going to start to wrap up our time together. We had a question come
Yeah.
through there in the chat from Emmy.
Emmy
Thanks,
was
Emmy.
asking, how do you deal with hatefulness and bigotry from parents? My first instinct is to push them out.
Mhm.
I that is usually my first instinct too. It's hard. It's hard not to react that way. But one thing that comes up for me too is also, again, similarly to what I was talking about with those with children and toxic friendships, is that there's a reason for the hatefulness and bigotry. And so approaching it from a place of curiosity, if it's not putting you in like personal harm and danger, try to ask questions, try to understand. And I mean, I've had this conversation in several different ways, in different capacities, and different levels of hatred and bigotry and misunderstanding. For some people, it's been that, well, for starters, anti-bias curriculum, even though it's called a curriculum, it's not something that's pre-written, pre-done. These are all conversations that we're having because children are bringing them up. And that is the most important key thing. They're already talking about it. That means that they are connecting their own dots, making their own theories. And that is why it is important that we talk about those things. And the second is that at the core, relationship is key in these moments. A couple of years ago, in one of my self-portrait groups, there were two children who identified as boys sitting next to each other drawing their self-portraits. And they were best friends. They did everything together. And one child drew just a straight line as their mouth, even though they're looking at the mirror. And the other child drew lips, what they actually look like. And the child who drew the line said, "Why are you drawing girl lips?" And so I wrote a piece of documentation about that because I thought it was a really interesting moment, and also for us to reflect on like, how is media messing with like how we're portraying our own faces and what messages are children receiving. And my gut instinct said, shoot, should I, when I'm writing out this dialogue, should I write child A, child B? And I went to my director and she said, no, just put their names on it. And the family came up to me the next day and they were visibly upset with me. They told me that they wish I hadn't put their child's name in that piece of documentation, and I could sense their shame and embarrassment. And while I could have gone into a space of shame and embarrassment or guilt, I actually felt really empowered to continue the conversation with them, because them coming up to me with that problem and saying that directly to me spoke a lot about our relationship. It spoke to me that they could come to me with conflict. And that, to me, if a true friendship and a true relationship is going to have conflict. So approaching things from a place of curiosity and wanting to know more, while it can be a really difficult place to get to because we all have our own things that we carry, and bigotry and hatefulness, obviously you're here at this anti-bias workshop, you don't want that. So of course that is rising in you when you hear those things, but it does take a big shift in perspective taking and really trying to regulate yourself and just try to be more curious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better, Vero. Such great advice and wisdom there. And I I really do believe in that striving for curiosity and understanding, because we are so divided right now as a society. Uh, and I completely echo that importance of making sure that you feel safe enough to do that. There is a line, right? We all need to set a boundary for ourselves, for our own psychological and emotional well-being. And, you know, yeah, thanks, Emmy. The paradox of tolerance. Yeah, absolutely. Um, you really have to decide as a community in an organization, what are we not willing to tolerate? Right. And unfortunately, sometimes community members will cross that line. And that's where it is, your job essentially as a program to decide, can we continue to be in relationship with
Mhm.
these stakeholders or these family members? And that can be a really hard decision to make. Uh, but what you were talking about earlier, Maddie, about like really from the very beginning touch point that you have with families and community members about who you are as a community, that helps make it really clear to those folks essentially what they're signing up for, um, who you are, what you believe in, what your values are. Um, yeah, and sometimes we do have to set a line about, hateful speech or behavior just will not be tolerated. Wow, well, we're at 8:59. If we had the time, Beto and I were going to show you a video clip from this Kale webinar, but we will just send you the link to this. It's a really inspiring 1 hour webinar. If you can, just the last 10 minutes are really, really motivating and empowering words of wisdom to help you continue on your journey. So we'll make sure that you get that link.
And then there's also, and I just posted some recommended consultants and organizations for continuing your own education and growth in the anti-bias journey. There's Ejima Jordan, who is a fantastic ECE coach and consultant. Anytime she's doing a training, I try to like make sure I can work it out in my schedule because she's just so incredible. Cultures Connecting, Rosetta Lee, heard a lot of her wisdom throughout this training. Debbie Lee Keenan and John Nimmo. They have they did the first anti-bias training video a couple of years ago, which I was actually very fortunate to be a part of. And then they just came out with a new film that is actually from the parent and family perspective of how to embrace anti-bias values. And then there is the amazing Victor Bradley, who has done a lot of great work among ECE and education in general and has developed incredible curriculums. Embrace Race, tons of resources for families and educators. They're really wonderful. Sammy Broaden, and then of course Kale, and follow us as well. We have anti-bias workshops, a lot of different workshops that we offer. Our next one is from an OT about sensational children and different sensory seeking. So check that out as well, please.
Thanks, Beto. Thank you to those of you watching the recording. We hope to connect with you in real life soon. And thank you so much to Maddie and Michelle and Emmy for taking the time to join us tonight. And we're going to stop the recording, but Beto and I are happy to hang around if you have any follow-up questions. So thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you. This is very deeply appreciated.